Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here, and guess what? I've reached 6,000 subscribers! How awesome is that? A big thank you to everyone that subscribed to my channel, it really means the world. So, how am I going to celebrate? Well, did you know that Top Cat is really popular in Mexico? To the point where a Mexican animation studio joined forces with Warner Brothers to make 2 Mexican Top Cat movies. But before I review these beasts, let's discuss the original Top Cat TV show. Top Cat was a Hanna-Barbera cartoon series which followed the adventures of Top Cat, who used his charm and wit to calm people with help from his loyal alley cat friends. But in each episode, a straight-laced cop called Officer Dibble would keep an eye on these cheeky street felines. The series was pretty much inspired by the Phil Silvers show, which starred Silvers as a crafty con man called Sergeant Bilko. Now, Top Cat was one of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons that I did watch a lot as a kid, but I will admit that I don't remember it very well. It's kind of a blur to me when I look back on it. With all that being said, let's now discuss the Mexican Top Cat movies. Before I proceed, I must let you all know that I'm going to be reviewing the UK versions of these films, which are English dubs without the voices of Danny Trejo or Rob Schneider. Let's begin with Top Cat the movie. In Top Cat the movie, a new chief is hired at the New York police station, a technology-obsessed man called Strickland, who replaces most of the staff with robots, covers the city with security cameras, introduces strict new laws, and uses holographic effects to frame Top Cat for a crime he didn't commit. Once they find out the truth, it's up to TC's gang of friends, Officer Dibble and Strickland's former assistant Trixie, to save Top Cat and take down this evil tyrant. This movie is one of the worst TV to film adaptations I have ever seen. It's just dreadful. The whole feature feels less like a cinematic experience and more along the lines of a very, very long episode of Top Cat. There's not much of a flow to the narrative because of this, as it's just a series of lackluster set pieces sloppily tacked together. The film is very rarely actually funny too. I think I laughed once or twice, which is saying something about an hour-and-a-half movie. Most of the jokes are predictable as all hell, feel incredibly forced, or just don't make any sense at all. For example, in one scene, TC is running away from an angry dog called Griswold, who randomly shouts, "I really hate birds," for no reason, and I could tell that this was just a very forced setup for a punchline. And you know what? I was right. I would have forgiven this movie's lack of ambition as a theatrical movie if it had a good sense of humour, but it doesn't. I mainly rolled my eyes and groaned at the comedy. I'll give the English version of the film this though, most of the cast do pretty decent jobs at recapturing the characters' voices from the original American TV show. Some are a little off, but most of them are impressively uncanny.
Woohoo! I'm going to be the new police chief of New York City!
You're welcome, Dibble. Well, if it wasn't for us, there'd be no crime for you to fight and you'd never have gotten the promotion.
Now, I don't remember how cleverly written the gang's cons were in the original TV show, but in this movie, they're not that smart or sneaky, and to compensate for the lack of imaginative tricks up TC's sleeve, the film decides to make all of his victims ridiculously stupid. It feels lazy, as if the filmmakers couldn't think of any smart or creative ways for Top Cat to trick people, so they chose to dumb TC's victims down into obnoxiously gullible idiots.
Well, how can I be a cat if I'm in dog jail?
But how come you look different from me?
I didn't want to mention this in front of the other fellas, but if I'm a dog, and I think we just agreed that I am, and you look different from me, which you do, I'm afraid that makes you a cat.
No, it can't be. All the tail chasing, the hydrant peeing, and the biting mailman? It was all a lie?
The decision to lower everyone's IQs is also a way for the over-the-top villain to find it easier to manipulate the public. Strickland is really upfront about how awful he is as a person.
The name's Strickland. I bought tickets online.
Oh yes, Mr. Strickland. Is the rest of your party here?
I am my party, nitwit. I bought the seat in front of me, the one behind me, the one on my left, and the one on my right, so I don't have to be anywhere near nosy, annoying, obnoxious people like you.
So it baffles me how no one could be suspicious of him. I mean, when Top Cat is framed by Strickland, no one puts two and two together to make the obvious conclusion that this technology-obsessed man could have used special computer effects to paint Top Cat in a bad light. Sure, DC's gang member brain is meant to be dense for comedic reasons, but everyone else should know better. Even Strickland's assistant Trixie, who has been by his side the whole time and helped him frame Top Cat, is shocked when she discovers that her boss is really a bad guy. How dumb can you be?
You were supposed to make this city safer, but instead, no one is safe from you.
A romance is also set up for Top Cat and Trixie too, with her role as Strickland's assistant bringing tension between their relationship. But these two have very little chemistry because they have barely any scenes together, and I honestly couldn't warm up to Trixie considering how brain-numbingly stupid she is for assuming that Strickland is a good-hearted man. Strickland isn't even a funny or intimidating antagonist, he's just rude and annoying, that's it, with the one running joke that he thinks he's handsome when really he's apparently not. What's frustrating is that this guy gets way too much screen time, and he's the worst character in the movie. His love for technology is also a way to drive home the film's oversimplified message that technology is bad. Sure, we get a quick little moment where a character shows off his fancy gadget and he explains how it benefits him, but for the most part, technology in this movie is shown as something that ruins lives, takes away jobs, and serves as a tool of evil. This results in a movie that feels like anti-technology propaganda. I'm sure that the filmmakers weren't that passionate about ridding the world of machines. I think they just wanted to have a message for the sake of having a message to seem profound. But it just comes off as half-hearted and shallow because the movie refuses to fully explore technology's place in this world. Then we have the film's animation, which composites Adobe Flash characters onto CGI-rendered backgrounds. It's certainly a unique idea for a style, but the result is quite the eyesore. There's a weird disconnect between the techniques that looks off-putting and out of place. At the end of the day too, this movie still looks like a TV show. There's nothing cinematic or impressive about the animation to help justify Top Cat's transition to the big screen. Everything looks so cheap and tacky. Not helping matters are the dull and gloomy backgrounds that create a really somber atmosphere throughout the film and make the unfunny comedy even more dreary. To conclude, Top Cat the movie is abysmal, a poorly scripted and painfully boring film that almost sent me to sleep. There's nothing funny or enjoyable about this film. It's cold, uninspired, and lazy. Now, this movie was a huge hit in Mexico, so maybe the Mexican script was better? I don't know. But the Mexican version can't be too different from the English version, because there's only so much that could have been changed in translation, as there's still problems with the movie that can't be pinned entirely on the English script. So, those are my thoughts on Top Cat the movie. Let's now move on to Top Cat Begins. In Top Cat Begins, we go back in time to see how TC met his gang members and faced the conflict of going up against the cruel, tyrannical mobster Mr. Big, who had way too much power over New York City at the time. As a prequel, Top Cat Begins doesn't have much of a tale to tell in terms of an origin movie. The backstories for each gang member are disappointingly rushed and nothing made me go, wow, so that's how it all started. These characters mean a lot to Top Cat fans, so you'd think that a prequel movie would find interesting ways to present their roots. But no, meeting these characters for the first time aren't much of a big deal. I didn't even feel like a moving friendship was blooming between these characters, as the film tended to skip over the chemistry building in favour of Top Cat taking advantage of these naive felines. Sure, TC comes around at the end when he realises that friendship is more important than materialism, but TC has still spent a huge majority of this movie shamelessly exploiting his gang. So it's hard to look back on the friendship between these characters with affection or fully appreciate the movie's message about friendship. This is the problem with making a character develop at the last minute. When it comes down to it, Top Cat Begins feels like a generic Top Cat episode, but with TC's friends being randomly introduced into the narrative as it goes along. Much like the first film, there's not much of a sense of passion or ambition. It's just a series of frantic set pieces, very loosely connected to the whole Mr. Big conflict and TC's gang being formed together. Also like the first film, supporting characters are dumbed down to make cons easier, resulting in some pretty unimaginative tricks and manipulations on TC's end, so little has changed compared to the first film in that regard. However, despite these complaints, I do believe that Top Cat Begins is superior to Top Cat the movie. Now, I know that's not much of a statement to make considering that Top Cat the movie is a steaming pile of shit, but hear me out. First of all, the comedy is actually much stronger. Yes, the bad jokes and desperate attempts for laughs outweigh the genuinely funny moments in terms of quantity, but when a joke lands in this film, it really lands. I'm not kidding. There are gags in this film that brought some loud, boisterous laughs out of me. Like when Top Cat tricks one of Mr. Big's goons into putting hot sauce in his eyes, and this happens. Then he encourages him to drink the whole bottle, and this happens! Or this great little moment at the airport.
First class, I guess. No, wait! Do you have anything more expensive than first class?
Well, there's platinum class. It's just like first class, but you get to rest your feet on a tourist class person.
I'll take it, and forget about Florida. Make it Saint Tropez.
Yes, sir.
Platinum class.
Now, what do these gangs have in common? They're not lost, they're not trying too hard, and they're not lazy. They have solid setups and really effective payoffs. In other words, they're good jokes. When going into Top Cat Begins, I wasn't expecting myself to laugh my ass off or even find stuff to enjoy, but I did. So kudos to the movie for having better humor than the first film. I would have appreciated it if the good jokes outnumbered the bad ones, but there's still way more laughs to be had compared to the first film. Then we have the villain, Mr. Big, who is a much better antagonist than Strickland, leagues above even. Why? He's genuinely intimidating. The film knows when to keep him in the shadows or out of frame, and his personality is unhinged enough to make his moments of bad temper stand out as threatening.
So I just need to know one thing. Where are the rest of my diamonds?
To back him up, his goons actually carry guns. These are loaded weapons too that they actually shoot. Holy shit, that's certainly one way to make your villains look badass compared to the rubbish antagonist who came before them. Also, because Mr. Big makes for a worthy adversary for Top Cat, TC has to think hard about conning the mobster in the finale, leading to an actual cleverly planned out setup for once, one that kept me on my toes, wondering what his game was. Oh, and there's also a guest character I loved too, Officer Dibble's grandma, a military woman who is both awesomely badass and entertainingly comical. It's brilliant how far the movie goes with her character's shtick, and she always kept me smiling when she was on screen. As you may have noticed, Top Cat Begins animation is quite different to the first movies, going for an entirely CGI route this time. I'll admit that this animation looks pretty cheap and stilted, which makes the physical gags and cartoony energy fall very flat. There's something wooden and held back about the characters' movement that severely hinders their personalities, slapstick reactions, and comic timing. It all annoyingly reminds me heavily of Postman Pat the movie's mediocre animation. However, it's easier on the eyes compared to the first film, thanks to the vibrant use of warm colours and much more appealing looking backgrounds. When it comes down to it, I'd rather look at this than this. To conclude, Top Cat Begins doesn't really have much to offer as a prequel, plus its story and production values are just as lackluster as the first films. But there's enough here for me to consider it to be the superior film of the two, from a few standout supporting characters like Grandma Dibble and Mr. Big, to the few funny comedy gags that legitimately made me laugh out loud, with proper belly chuckles. If I had to watch Top Cat Begins again, I honestly wouldn't complain, as it's much easier to sit through than the first film. Yes, it's kind of boring, stupid, and not exactly a good film, but come on, look which movie it had to live up to. So, those are my thoughts on Top Cat Begins. I've been Jambareeqi, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then feel free to subscribe to my channel, because I make a lot of videos quite like this one. And again, a huge thank you to everyone that has helped me reach 6,000 subscribers. I really do appreciate it. Cheerio, folks.